The Northern Territory, Australia's last frontier, is a vast region far removed from the densely populated southern states. 5 days constant driving from Sydney and we're still travelling north along the Stuart Highway. Our destination, Darwin. It's August, the middle of the dry season, and we're about to begin an exciting and adventurous journey along the northern coast to the little-known islands of Arnhem Land. In Darwin, Brett Nixon, my travelling companion, and I repack the gear that we'll need for the next 8 weeks. All our travelling now will be in Rabuna, our 5-metre Quintrex. From Darwin, we'll head east to the many islands scattered along the Arnhem Land coast. After 2 months of fishing and exploring, we'll reach Cape Wessel. Darwin's Fanny Bay provides a peaceful setting for our launching. Jowdy, my Kelpie, is to come with us, although she'd rather not get her feet wet. We pump 750 litres of fuel into the specially fitted tanks, and we're away. We can carry only a limited supply of provisions, so Brett and I soon begin the constant task of finding food. And what could be better than a good feed of mud crabs? A fish suspended in the net will attract the crabs and they'll tangle in the fine mesh. Negotiating the slush at low tide is a tedious business, so Brett mud skis the oars back to the boat while Jowdy does it the hard way. The giant crabs come out to feed among the mangroves on the rising tide, and we motor along the coastal estuaries looking for a likely place to set our nets. A marker float suspends a net in place, and we'll check the traps later in the day. While we wait for the crabs to take the bait, I have a go for a barramundi. This is the way I like to cook fish, straight onto the hot coals. Inside the charred skin, the meat is sweet and juicy. We go round the traps at high tide, and we're not disappointed. The crabs, exhausted in the tangled nets, are safe to handle.
I have to see it. I tell you what, the
Mud crabs don't come much bigger than this one. And what a great way to end the day. After a few days among the mangroves, Brett and I are keen to be moving. I'll have to keep an eye on Jowdy from now on. We've been warned that there are some pretty big crocodiles about. Jowdy puts up with having her feet washed before going aboard. The prevailing winds increase, and we're forced to seek shelter in a delightful tidal river on Melville Island. Lunch is fairly basic, just a few small mullet and the last of our Darwin bread. Brett assures me that this is the way they make toast back home on the cattle station in the Kimberley. Jowdy prefers to relax out of the heat. The strong wind keeps us in the creek for days, but there's plenty to do. It's always a thrill to catch fish this way. On the falling tide, we discover bunches of oysters. A minute or two on the coals, the shells open, and they're ready to eat. Small sharks cruise the shallows. They're good eating, and it's always a challenge to hunt them. After all the excitement, it's back to bed. I startle a small dotterel, and on closer inspection discover that it's nesting. The broken wing ploy is typical of this species as it tries to distract me from its nest. The eggs are exceptionally large for such a tiny bird. Terns, feeding beyond the reef, let us know that it's time to get out the fishing gear. To save my commercially made lures for another time, I try out an old favourite made from a powdered milk tin liner. The foil, shaped like a small fish, is soon ready to go. The surface boils as the fry panics ahead of the bigger fish. It's frustrating to see so much action and not get a bite straight off. But this time I'm lucky, and it's a good one too. These queenfish, or skinnies, as they're often called, put up a good fight. The winds are easing. Tomorrow, we'll move on. On the falling tide, we pull up behind a rapidly emerging reef. Fish, trapped in the shallow pools, often shelter under the coral ledges, but with experience, they can be located and caught. Danger, too, lurks around the rocks and coral, and we're careful. Furtive stingrays with a poisonous barb at the base of the tail are a constant worry. In 1964, on my first trip to the territory, I did some crocodile hunting, but now I'm keenly interested in the survival of these splendid animals. And as we push on towards the Wildman River, I'm on the lookout for signs of the reptiles. Since their protection, their numbers have increased. Anchored in the mouth of the river is the Heron, a battered barramundi boat owned by Tony Spinella, one of the territory's oldest barramundi fishermen. Tony pioneered the fishing industry along the coast back in the 50s. It's a tough, rugged existence, with back-breaking work for months at a time, night and day, whenever the tide is right, constantly seeking the elusive barra. As soon as the nets are emptied, the fish are filleted and frozen in the huge freezer on board. Some other species, like this giant golden catfish, are also saleable. As the filleting begins, a curious spectacle occurs. Hundreds of catfish come to the surface around the boat for a free feed. The catfish, familiar with the boat's routine, appear as soon as the men arrive back from checking the nets. As the first scraps hit the water, the frenzy begins and continues furiously until the last fish is clean. Never have I witnessed such a performance. Within seconds, nothing remains. Intrigued by the ferocity of the seething mass, Brett dangles a scrap above the water. So tenacious are the catfish that they will not let go until the very last moment. The species is commercially useless, so they grow fat with impunity beneath the fisherman's boat. Curious for a closer look, Brett lowers a bare hook into the water and brings up a fish. Catfish must be handled with caution. The venomous dorsal and pectoral fins can wound painfully. The long, whisker-like feelers give the fish its common name. A popular visitor to the Heron, ever watchful for choice scraps, is the splendid white-breasted sea eagle. So majestic in flight, this regal bird is one of my favorites. We motor up the Wildman River looking for crocodiles. Tony tells us that a number of potential man-eaters have been stealing fish from his nets, and we're hoping to spot them. Late afternoon, on a dropping tide, is the best time to look for the big crocs, when they're most likely to be sunning themselves on the exposed mud banks. I spot some likely tracks. It's a croc, all right, and the tracks are fresh, indicating that it's only recently left the water and is lurking in the mangroves. There it is. It checks my position and disappears. And that's a really big croc. I soon realized that the mighty estuarine crocodile is definitely making a comeback after being shot almost to extinction. Within an hour, we see dozens of these prehistoric monsters. There are few animals so awesome as this huge saurian, perhaps 100 years old, edging towards the water. It would indeed be a disaster if these ancient reptiles were exterminated simply because they're a potential hazard to humans. The pop-eyed mullet, an abundant source of food for the barramundi and young crocodiles, spend their entire lives in a state of total panic. The future must see these fascinating mangrove-lined rivers as a major tourist attraction, especially if the crocodile population continues to thrive. The crocodile has an unnerving habit of disappearing without a trace beneath the murky water. Direct descendants of the dinosaurs, they're a spine-tingling sight as they slide into the water. The days pass and we continue to explore the interlocking river systems. The little corellas keep us company. On the really high tides, we're able to leave the mangroves and negotiate the channels out across the coastal plains. Known as the Buffalo Plains because of the thousands of beasts that roam across the vast expanse, the marshy ground is churned into impassable bogs where the buffaloes wallow. The buffs, descendants of the animals introduced in 1838, are now as much a part of the Northern Territory as the indigenous crocodiles. On the way, we call in at Port Essington, looking for evidence of one of the territory's earliest colonies. After several attempts at settlement, a township was established here in 1838 with the intention of making it the capital of the north and a great commercial centre. Like so many other abortive attempts, Port Essington was abandoned within 14 years. The scattered ruins show that buildings of substance and quality had been erected, and one can only imagine the isolation and hardship of this ambitious venture. Water buffalo, imported from Asia, were released here when the settlement was abandoned, and their descendants now roam the north in plague proportions. Here's a crumbling kiln. And a deep well, empty now in the dry season. Even today, the only access is by boat, and recent arrivals have left reminders of their visit. Travelling east, we arrive at Mission Bay on Croker Island. In 1964, I worked here among the Aboriginal people, and I'm delighted to meet an old friend, Jimmy Jambalula. Nobody knows how old he is, but he remembers the Macassan traders who regularly voyaged to Australia until the turn of the century. We talk of the early days and the changes that he's seen. Never again, he laments, will they build a dugout canoe like this one. I feel the canoe should be in a museum, not rotting here on the beach. Jimmy and his wife are the only people who now camp on the beach. The rest of the community live in European-style houses. At his main camp, the old man passes his time painting traditional designs on bark. He's the last of the traditional bark painters of Croker Island, and these paintings will eventually be sold in art galleries throughout Australia. His wife Jilky is never idle as she weaves beautiful pandanus leaf baskets for the tourist trade in Darwin. It saddens me to watch the last of the old people. With them will go many of the traditions of their tribe. As I wait for the returning tide, I make up a good supply of lures. Tomorrow, we head for some of the best fishing spots that I know. Well, you can't get the big ones every time. These are just the right size for lunch. When the tide turns, the bigger fish are soon on the bite. And this is a sight every fisherman dreams of. Fish frantically following the lure. Schools of trevally keep us really busy. It's mid-afternoon when we try trolling in deeper water, and we're on to even bigger fish. Brett lands a barracuda, and it's obvious why this fish has such a fearsome reputation. At the end of another great day, I unload our catch at Mission Bay. Jimmy and his family are pleased. Our next stop is Grant Island, and Jowdy is happy to be ashore. Few people visit this delightful place. It's a part of the Arnhem Land Aboriginal Reserve, and entry permits must be approved by the tribal elders. Fish abound in the shallow, sheltered bays, and within the hour, our Gullara and I have speared some mullet, and Brett brings in a tropical crayfish. What a marvellous way to spend a week, so far away from the rush and tear of the big cities. Lunch will be ready in 15 minutes. With ease and skill, our Gullara hand nets a good catch. Nearby, we make a chilling discovery, a croc slide. Only a short time ago, it has silently entered the water. From the number of tracks we find, it seems that this is a regular haunt of the big reptile. The croc was most probably after the turtles that nest along the beach. Our Gullara finds one of the nests and collects a good feed. As the day ends, we work our way towards a small creek to shelter for the night. Our Gullara can never resist another mullet, and once again, it's fish for tea. In the mangrove-lined tidal rivers, many species of fish congregate, and we're after the shy, yellow-tailed mullet, an elusive target. But Brett is deadly accurate with his crossbow.
Got him. And losing?
The harpoon head of bush timber has 3 straightened fish hooks embedded in its point.
Working well, that crossbow, isn't it? Got him. Push the point. Yeah, that's nice.
Another dweller of the mangroves is a gregarious flying fox. Particularly evil-tempered when disturbed during the day, they shriek and squabble as they wheel away from our intrusion. This bat merely moves to a higher vantage point and, unperturbed, settles down to sleep out the afternoon. Saltwater fly fishing is a relatively new sport, and I find it an exhilarating way to fish with light tackle. I hate sand in my swag, so Jowdy has to put up with having her feet washed whenever we pack up to leave. And now we continue east along the Arnhem Land coast. All our fuel supplies were sent in months ago, and here at Elcho Island we fill our tanks. The props are continually changed according to the load carried. This way we achieve maximum efficiency. The Elko community was originally established here because of the guaranteed supply of fresh water. At low tide, it streams out of the sand along the beach. We always ensure that we carry an adequate supply of fresh water whenever we take to sea. We head towards the Wessels, a chain of narrow, stony islands stretching north towards New Guinea. These islands, among the most remote in Australia, are a part of the Arnhem Land Aboriginal Reserve. Again, the telltale track of the huge saltwater croc. We won't be diving in these waters. At a small freshwater soak, Jowdy nervously investigates the fresh scent. Only minutes ago, the croc was here, either drinking or waiting for rock wallabies. We can always find some mullet for a feed, and I get a charge out of catching them with a hand spear and a woomera. This narrow race separating two islands is called the hole in the wall, and it can be a very dangerous channel for larger vessels when the tide is really racing. Travelling slowly to appreciate the rugged beauty of this unique place, I'm shocked to see graffiti left by sailors. I'll never understand why anyone should spoil our wilderness in this way. At low tide, a special treat can be found under the rock ledges. This is a particular species of oyster that grows to the size of a saucer. They're so big that Brett collects a good feed in no time. The strong flavour is best appreciated after a minute sautéed in the frying pan.
We can take this back there.
We keep to the sheltered western side of the island. The rough, dry season winds are unbearable along the eastern shore. At last, my favourite bay, at the bottom of Machinbar, the most northerly island. I first visited this idyllic inlet in 1964 to salvage a lugger wrecked during a cyclone. We camped on this beach for 4 weeks. The sand is the finest I've seen anywhere. I wandered down the beach to a spot I remember well. Here the Dana Maria was thrown up on the sand during the big cyclone of '64. When the crew was rescued, the lugger was left until the dry season. Then I returned with the owner and a team of Aborigines to refloat the stricken vessel. At low tide, night or day, 24 men dug to free the Dana Maria. On the high tide, we relaxed and danced and hunted. Our first attempt failed, and we returned to the mission. Later, 6 of us came back to Machinbar to try again. We dug a channel to the sea, repaired the broken planking, and slowly inched her down the beach on each high tide. After an exhausting month's labour, the Dana Maria was freed and towed back to Elko Island for extensive repairs. Sadly, a year later, the Dana Maria was completely wrecked in another storm off Queensland. I'll never forget the hardships of that operation. But now, it's back to more leisurely pursuits, tempting the fighting queenfish. What a glorious way to spend a day. Clear blue skies, warm water, and not a care in the world. Armies of small soldier crabs skitter along the beach at low tide, extracting organic fragments from the sand, leaving neat, tidy pellets behind them. Unlike the sideways movements of other crabs, these walk forwards. When the tide turns or they're threatened, they disappear into the sand with a comical corkscrew action. Further up the beach are the holes of the ghost crabs. If you have the patience to dig for them, they're exceptionally good bait. With plenty of bait on board, we look for a suitable reef. The echo sounder picks up a deep channel. This should be a good spot. One of the exciting things about reef fishing is the variety of species caught, although there's always a problem of troublesome sharks. These red snapper are a superb table fish. I've hooked something big, and for almost an hour anticipate a great catch. A sleepy shark breaks the surface. The line snaps, and it's all over. Ah well, there's always tomorrow. Days later, we beach for Boona on the sheltered shore close to the Cape Wessel automatic lighthouse. Some good friends are camping here, and we settle down to talk about old times. This family fly out here to the small service airstrip and stay through the dry season. Cape Wessel is the most northerly point of Arnhem Land. Beyond this headland stretches the Arafura Sea all the way to the coast of New Guinea. This small canoe, flotsam from New Guinea, is now used for turtle hunting. Canoes rarely reach Australia, but when they do, are of special significance to the local people, for they believe that tribal spirits travel in the drifting craft. This wreck was abandoned by Vietnamese refugees who mistakenly thought that they'd reached Darwin and beached their leaking boat. The regular coastal surveillance planes spotted them and they were soon rescued. The coastal patrols are constantly on the lookout for refugee boats and drug smugglers. We too are under investigation until cleared by the authorities in Darwin. Larrabee is after stingrays, a favoured food. The painstaking preparation of the ray is always carried out according to tribal custom. The fish is placed on the fire and cooked well.
Tengah kau baca kadang ang kau nyala lah. Alam mana dia. Tak mana yang. Bari mah.
The stringy meat is washed several times in fresh water, then squeezed into tight, rubbery balls. Days pass as we explore Machinbar with Larrawi. Further up the beach, he shows us a number of huge crocodile tracks heading over a large sand dune. Follow the tracks, he urges, and you'll be amazed. A short walk away is a beautiful sight, and quite unexpected in this sandy terrain. Here, where the crocodiles lurk, the Wessel Island tribe once camped along the lagoon. Always conscious of the need for a balanced diet on these extended journeys, I'm soon off collecting my greens, but I'm reluctant to venture too far from the bank. We stay among the lilies, where the approach of a croc would be easily detected. Water lily bulbs. This is bush tucker that I really enjoy. Roasted on the coals, they taste like small potatoes. We set off for a cave hidden deep in the interior that I visited 15 years earlier. It was a fascinating discovery that has intrigued me over the years, and I've always planned one day to return. Beneath this ledge is the pictorial record of the impression made upon the Aborigines by the sailing ships that must have passed this way in the early days of European discovery. For tens of thousands of years, the Aborigines had lived in isolation on these lonely islands. Then came strangely clad men in huge boats. No doubt they stopped briefly, and these experiences had such an impact on the Aborigines that they recorded them in ochre. On my first visit in 1965, without suitable film, I was unable to record these lovely paintings in the dim light under this low ledge. This time I'm here to film these historically important pictographs. Nobody is really sure of the significance of these uniformed figures, but we do know that the Dutch and Portuguese passed this way, and more recently Matthew Flinders and the Pearlers sailed these waters. Sadly, the paintings are slowly being obliterated by wasp nests, and so these historic records of Australia's past must vanish forever. It's now 2 months since we left Darwin, and Jowdy has adapted completely to her new lifestyle. She even enjoys getting wet, and my swag is still her favorite camping spot. The ocean currents, ceaselessly swirling between Australia and New Guinea, collide at Cape Wessel, and it's a fabulous fishing spot. As I'm landing at Trevally, a Spanish mackerel takes another lure still in the water. And this is what I call a big barracuda. With an unseasonal change in the weather, the fish suddenly go off the bite. so I try my game rod to get the lures down deep. A good-sized queenfish puts up a mighty fight. And so it's time for lunch. Brett organises a really good feed before we leave Cape Wessel for the last time. We pack our gear, Jowdy cleans up the campsite, and already I'm planning my next journey to another wild and rugged place.